Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. So basically, I'll jump in. Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here today. What I was going to do is just run you through. Viioni as a company, we supply automated systems, complete end-to-end solutions from conveyor and robotics, sortation systems. We do all the mechanical, electrical, software and controls. And as we're in a range of industries from manufacturing, pharmaceutical, and warehousing and logistics. What I'll run through here today is just a project we completed last year in Nottingham in England. This was the main site that was manufacturing the COVID lateral flow test kits. So as you can imagine, at the time it was very fast-paced project. It had to be done yesterday. If you remember back to winter of 21, when there was a major shortage and nobody could get their hands on test kits and all the rest of it. The UK government had assigned SureScreen Diagnostics in England, in Nottingham, to manufacture these. And we were approached to provide a solution, again, complete end-to-end, an empty shell of a new warehouse that they were moving into, and essentially to streamline their processes. Obviously, the speed was the biggest issue, trying to get these test kits out on the shelves for people at the time. And being able to do that in an efficient way, an accurate way, with it being pharmaceutical, obviously it still had all the usual pharmaceutical checks and requirements that we had to adhere to, and to ensure that the correct product was leaving the warehouse on every occasion. So to give you the background of where it started, SureScreen, as I said, they've been manufacturing lateral flow tests for many years. I'm sure many of us, I never really heard of a lateral flow test before COVID, but they obviously became very commonplace since. And SureScreen were saying they were the first UK manufacturer approved by the government to start supplying them. At the time, they were already supplying the likes of Australia, Philippines, Poland, a few other countries around the world. And the UK government then gave them the go-ahead in the UK to start trying to speed up the process, because obviously we had all the supply chain issues that it came with at the time, relying on imports, etc. So for SureScreen, they had to start producing these in mass production as soon as possible, and they moved into an empty warehouse in Nottingham at the time. We were approached in June 21, and it was basically just at that stage, it was actually just they were looking box erectors to erect these little boxes that you see so that they could manually pack them. From there, a lot of issues with manual, trying to find the labor efficiencies, not fast enough, and also the traceability in parts were their key issues. So what we did, first of all, as a stepping stone, while we were implementing full automation and working with the customer to go through it, we implemented a semi-automated solution, if you like, as you can see in that image there, where it was just basically conveyors. So what we did was we had an automatic case erector at the start of the line, was erecting these boxes that you receive your lateral flow kits in. So this was basically to assemble the kits that you would have received in your house when you ordered your lateral flow test online. 7 tests in a box, as long with your swab, your solution, etc. We put in 10 of these pack lines, an automatic box erector at the start of each line was just spitting the boxes out. We automatically labeled the box. So one of the big issues they had when they started doing it manually was traceability. Obviously from the pharmaceutical industry, everything has to be track and trace right down to the every part level. So we were able to just simply apply a barcode label to the underside of the box automatically, which contained the batch number, the production date, expiry date, etc. That box was then conveyed on the bottom tier conveyor, where, as you see, you had all the operators lined either side of the conveyors. So it sped up their process, so rather than having to manually erect every box, they were simply lifting an empty box off the bottom tier conveyor, packing the products into it, closing the box, and then they set it back up onto the top conveyor, which then took it away to a pack area to go into a shipping case to be distributed out to the NHS, basically. So that was a temporary solution. We put that in, that went in rapid. It was kind of a 6-week process, get it up and running as soon as possible. And it gave them some key efficiencies and being able to streamline the process, put a bit of a process in place, if you like, that the operators were just packing boxes, setting it on a conveyor, and off it went. It allowed them to control their labor, but they still had major issues. Winter 21, if you can remember back to all the shortages, etc. Trying to get COVID kits on the shelves was a major issue for the government. We had Boris Johnson on site one day as well visiting, and he was packing boxes, which was entertaining. But we had, and ultimately what that was giving them, it was giving them a bit of accuracy, but it was still very labor intensive. They were still having a lot of QC issues with operators putting 6 kits in a box instead of 7, and the likes of that. So what we were looking at as this time went on was we were trying to implement a fully automated solution. So as time progressed, we looked at both the entire process. So from goods coming into the warehouse, into the manufacturing hall where the kits are produced, collecting the kits, bringing it to the pack area, and then using robotics to pack it. So we use several different technologies, which I'll talk through here. The first here is autonomous mobile robots. So these are completely self-navigating robots. Essentially what they were doing is collecting totes in the production hall and delivering it to a storage area. So as what you see there in the background, this is our little schematic of a Combio machine, which was a machine that SureScreen were already using prior to COVID. They obviously ramped up. They went from about 2 or 3 machines up to 26, pretty much in the space of a month or 2 as they ramped up production. And what we did was just a simple little conveyor solution at the end of the line, 3 zones. So empty tote goes on at the start, middle tote's getting filled from the machine, and then the final tote is ejected from the system where the autonomous robot collected. So with this, we had 9 AMRs. Each of those production machines, they had 20 in production at this stage, each one producing 2,200 lateral flow tests per hour, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can imagine the scale of this operation and the amount of test kits that were actually coming out of this warehouse. And yet you still couldn't get them on the shelf when you went to the NHS. But as I said, what we did here, so this is a quick video of the live operation. So you can see the AMRs there going, collecting the totes that are full. What that allowed the customer to do, and the big benefit it gave them, was one, labor, because at the start we had all these fantastic Combio machines producing COVID kits, but you still had a lot of operators and people monitoring the machine and then carrying totes. So basically they had to lift a full tote, carry it from the machine, bring it down an elevator to feed it to the packing area, where there's a lot of then intensive manual processes to pack them into cases for shipping. The other benefit it gave them was the traceability. So if you look there, every one of them totes has an RFID tag, and all the robots, you'll see the little tablet there in the front of the robot, that's an RFID reader. So throughout the entire process, from raw components coming into the warehouse, which was actually downstairs on the ground floor, this production's upstairs on a new mezzanine that they built. We were tracing every single part throughout the whole process. So from it coming in, it gets scanned into our software. We then know when it was received, the batch number, the manufacturer, etc. That was all stored. We then released the raw components to the Combio machine. So we know that we've released batch X on the 13th of February, and that's gone to Combio machine number 1. We're then collecting the full totes. Again, we know the complete batch number, what date, production, every single part that's in that test kit, where it came from and where it was produced. And then we're tracing that through the entire process till it's packed and out the back door. And that was obviously one of the major conformities of the automation, was allowing this customer to put in that traceability factor on every single component. As well as streamlining that process up there. As I say, it allowed operators to stay at the machine, ensuring the machines were running at full capacity, there was no issues. They obviously had to input raw components and things into the machine and keep them operating. So it meant the operators stood there rather than an operator coming. You can see the length of the hall there. It was probably about a 60, 70 meter run, where an operator would have had to lift a box of test kits, walk 60, 70 meters to a freight elevator, go downstairs, take it off the elevator, give it to the guys unpacking, then come back up the stairs. It's all downtime and unnecessary downtime. So by using the autonomous robots, it allowed them to stay productive and do the value added task of actually the task that was adding value to the whole process, which is actually producing test kits. These little robots, they're common product for us now. They're very, very popular in the industry. They are completely self-navigating, so there's built-in cameras. They detect the whole area around them. The big advantage over this technology compared to previously, it would have been more AGVs, automatic guided vehicles. They are typically set to transfer from A to B on a set path. So you set it up, it goes from A to B. If anything gets in its way, it stops. What you'll see with these robots, if anything gets its way, it's actually intelligent enough to actually move around. So you'll see in this clip of the video where it'll detect humans in front of them and just drive around them and continue on its path. Likewise, if a route was completely blocked, they're intelligent enough to look at the entire map of the area and say, okay, this way is blocked, and find alternative paths. So they're constantly moving. You're not having vehicles stopped and waiting for blockages to be cleared or anything like that. They're constantly in production, moving product and doing the tasks that they're assigned to do. So then on to downstairs. What we did when the test kits were produced upstairs on the Combio machines, the autonomous robot took it to a vertical carousel. So we use a fully automated vertical carousel. Again, the tote is scanned from the AMR into the carousel. So again, we know exactly what product is in that carousel at all times. And then once we have a complete batch, we release them to one of these 4 robotic lines. And this is a fully automated robotic process whereby the totes containing the test kits were taken from the carousel. Again, our software was tracing it. So we would hold back until we know we have a full batch. We have the work orders for that day. We would then say, okay, batch number 123 is going to robot line number 1 today. We know what time we released it. We know what batch numbers came from. We know what Combio machines. So upstairs, it could have been Combio 1 to 10 as part of that batch. We then release all those totes together to go into the pack line. Each one of those pack lines we reuse the case directors that we put on the manual lines. So it's automatically inducting 2 case directors at the start, inducting boxes down either side. And then we use the KUKA Delta robots to pack. So as the product goes down the central conveyor, the robot automatically detects the packs, picks and places them into the open boxes. We then induct the component bags, which contains your swab and vial, seal the box, drop the leaflet into it as well, so your little instructions leaflet, which give you your, how to do the tests, etc. So that's all in there. So now the operators at the end of the line, from what it was winter 21 to what it is today, instead of having probably, I would say, about 15 to 20 operators on every box director trying to frantically pack goods, and test kits lying everywhere and falling on the floor, and boxes with 10 in it and boxes with 2 in them. From that and a manual process, we managed to fully automate it. So now you have 4 people at the end of every line. Their task is simply just to close the lid of the box and run it through this labeling machine that we have at the end. So all they're doing, box comes in the bottom conveyor, close the lid, set it on the top conveyor. It then gets a tamper-proof label applied to it, and it's ready for shipping. So again, the full process, it was allowing the customer to really advance the production. First of all, the throughput was the major benefit for them, being able to produce these kits at a much faster rate. Each one of those lines is doing 42 boxes a minute. So 42 times 4 with 7 test kits in every box every single minute across a 24-hour process. You can do the maths on that one. I don't have the number in front of me, but it was a significant volume of COVID kits being pumped out the back of those lines every day. And here's a video of the robot line in operation. So there's your test kits, 1,176 test kits per minute being produced across 24 hours a day. Again, the main benefits for the customer, say Sure Screen Diagnostics, they were doing this contract, it was for the UK government. And as you can imagine, the UK government was kicking and screaming, it has to be done. We actually, at the time, we were trying to source parts, and like everything in the world, the supply chain issues were a major problem. Being quoted, anyone in the industry seeing even the likes of Siemens, even still today, you're getting quoted PLCs in the likes 8-9 month lead times. We just had to beg, steal and borrow from wherever we could to get these lines up and running, with a bit of help from senior figures within the UK government, sort of giving people a push and everything else. The downside was the robots were supplied by KUKA, manufactured in Austria, and I don't think an Austrian manufacturer was too interested in what the UK government had to say, but we got through it. Working with the customer, within June 21, we started semi lines. They were up by Christmas, and this fully automated line has now been in production since June of last year. Sorry, so about 7-8 months now. Has quietened down, as you can imagine, as we all hoped it would, with COVID hopefully dying out and not being as prominent as what it was. There is a future use for the customer in which they will be continue to run these lines. Not only do they do COVID test kits, but now the lateral flows. You know, everyone on the planet really now knows what a lateral flow test is. Sure, Screen actually manufacture a range of different products which uses the exact same test, the same principle, how to use it. But for many other viruses and diseases, they have ones for diabetes now. There's a couple of cancers and various viruses. They're going through testing at the minute for monkeypox for a new product. So that's where they're going to be able to continue to utilize this automation going forward for different products as science develops and as pharmaceuticals develop and different viruses come along. They continue to use this automation. As I say, with this line, you see there, those are KUKA Delta robots. That was a new product that KUKA only brought to the market last year. We were actually the first company to implement it into a live system. So we had 24 of these robots across the entire process, 6 per line. And as you can see, we utilize the KUKA Pick Vision as well. So as those test kits, the test kits that were produced upstairs in the Combio, they're brought to the line in a tote. You have an operator to start a line that just simply tips the full tote into a hopper. The automation then automatically brings the kits from the hopper and just dumps them onto that middle conveyor there. We have cameras throughout the system, which then detects the location of the product. And then that then tells the robot where to pick. So we're basically just scattering test kits along that middle conveyor, just getting them in there, and then the robot picks and places them to the next empty box. So by the time it reaches the end of that line, you have a full box with 7 test kits, a component bag, and a leaflet. So the operators at the end of the line are very simply just closing the lid, set on the conveyor, off it goes. Again, the whole way through it, the software was the major benefits, the traceability that we're offering. Every single part is tracked to every single line. We know what time it's produced, what Combio came from, what manufacturers used, what dates, etc. We can get the full reporting on that, so they have the full traceability off the back end. I say that's been running now since June of last year. Slowing down now, thankfully not being used as much, but they will be introducing new products to it as well to continue the benefit of it. So say there's just an example of the software. So this is all Viioni's own in-house software that we developed. So every single product is tracked from the raw components. So if you imagine your lateral flow test kit, it comes as 2 little plastic strips, which then get sandwiched together with the solution inside. All that comes into the warehouse. It's scanned in. We then track it from the warehouse into the carousel, from the carousel to the Combio and manufacturing, from the Combio machine back to the carousel, and then the carousel into the robotic pack line, all through use of RFID. Sorry, just go back here. And as I say, with the major benefits for the customer and the technology we were using, they were able to reduce the labor significantly. Being seen across the industry now at the minute, we are seeing so many companies. It's not a case of trying to find labor. There's a major shortage. People don't want to be working 12-hour shifts in warehouses, certainly doing nights, putting stuff in the boxes. And what it done, so it allowed them to upscale their production. So they have the 4 automated lines with about 20-30% of the labor that they would have had to start with, which has allowed them to meet the targets that the government was setting them at the time, allowed them to expand, allowed them to actually not only supply the UK government, but actually go and get contracts from other countries around the world by showing we have the technology, we have the traceability. They were a customer who scientifically and from the pharmaceutical industry background, they had all the reputation. They done everything. They had the lateral flow test. They were a well-known company within the industry, but it took them to the next level of being able to use automation to actually pack these kits and get them out to the shelf and the speed required by governments at the time. As well as the labor, there was traceability. As I say, again, at the start with the manual packing, they had so many issues, and within pharmaceutical, QC check on a batch, one incorrect box, the entire batch is failed. They would have to go and rework hundreds of boxes and take them all, empty them all out, refill them, seal them, get them approved again, going through all the QC checks. So obviously very time consuming, very costly, very labor intensive. That's now removed because we now, through the robotics, we can guarantee that we're putting 7 boxes or 7 test kits into every single box. If we do have an issue on the line where we can actually detect if a robot's missed a pick, or we can detect if it's a 6 or an 8, we detect that automatically and reject it before it gets to the packing area, so that operators you shouldn't be receiving your test kits in the post with 6 kits instead of 7, basically. A lot of adjustments as well, the flexibility going forward. A lot of people, when they invest in automation, they can be quite concerned about, in the past, it might be very rigid. One robot can do one product. What happens if in 6 months' time that product changes, or your process, your business changes, you go from a 24-hour operation to a 12-hour operation? A lot of that is taken into account now with automated solutions. What I showed you there with the autonomous robots, big benefit over the more traditional technology of AGVs is the flexibility. As I said, they're not set to one path. You can create a map of your warehouse. The robot then basically learns that map, and it can go anywhere within that map. If you extend your production hall in 3 months' time, you build an extension, you simply take one robot, you drive it around the new area of the warehouse, you add it to your map, and it's ready to go. Within a couple of hours, you can actually add another 100 meters onto the length of your warehouse and the software, and have the robots operational. Also, with the autonomous robots, it's all cloud-based. Everything is done through the Fetch Core cloud. The AMRs are connected to it. So if you decide in 6 months' time we need another 10 robots, it is simply a case of getting the robot out of the box. You connect it to the Wi-Fi network. The map is there. The software is there. The pickup points are there. It's ready to go. You can literally add 10 robots to your fleet within an hour or two. Just take them out of the box, connect them, and off they go doing productive tasks. And again, the same goes for those Cooker robotic lines. If they needed to add more robots to the line, it can be very easily done. And that's giving you the flexibility to adjust to the ever-changing scenarios that come. And that was a big, I think, probably an issue for many companies looking to invest in automation over the years, is kind of give me that flexibility. What happens if my company changes, my business processes change? The flexibility is now there to offer that to customers now going forward with the technology that we have. So I think that's pretty much all I have on that. If there's any questions, feel free to jump in and ask. But just in summary, as I say, it was a complete end-to-end solution. That's what we do as a company. The solutions are tailored to each business. It's all about basically maximizing efficiency, maximizing productivity within a warehouse or a manufacturing process, and reducing labor count. And a lot of the most common question is, you're doing people out of jobs and all the rest of reducing labor. It's not necessarily a case of that. It's upskilling labor as well, because you always have, like for example, for this, there was a shortage of labor. To do it manually, they needed about over 300 people, and they did at a stage. The UK government turned right at a stage last winter and said, we need to get these products out. What can we do? How many people do you need? And next thing, there was about 300 people arrived on site. These were people, there was a people being on a
Kevin, it's maybe a fault on my end, but I've lost your sound. Can everyone else hear Kieran okay? Kevin okay? Just while Kevin's sorting that out, I thought it might just be me because my our broadband's not great. We have a few. Let me just share my screen 1 second. We have had Mayor who make those mobile robots on one of our past webinars, so I will just share the link to our channel. Right, 1 second. So there is our YouTube channel. I can't share my screen. I think Kevin's still host, but that is our YouTube channel, and we've had Kuka on talking about some of their cobots and robots, and Mayor talking about their autonomous robots, and quite a few other people who are in that space as well. Let me just see if I can. See.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now, Kevin.
Sorry, don't know what happened there.
You're all right. You're all right.
Sorry about that.
I was just saying to everyone, I just shared a link to our YouTube channel. We had one of the team from Kuka on one of our previous webinars talking about some of the cobots and robots they do, and somebody from Mir as well talking about their autonomous robots.
Yeah, we've worked with Mir in the past as well, in a couple of projects a few years ago. On this particular site, there's a company called Fetch Robotics. They're actually an American company, and it was them that we used. We partnered with them long term at the time. And they are a completely cloud-based solution, which is where they differ from Mir a little bit. But Kuka as well, as I say, that the robots we used in that project, we were the first in the UK to install them. They were just out last year, along with the PIC vision technology. And I think any robotics programmer out there, I mean, certainly our guys all got very excited about the technology, because it was so. What Kuka have done on that is actually very advanced and makes it a so much simpler process. I mean, those type of robots picking and placing based on the camera, it has been around for years, used quite a lot in the food industry, but it can be a very complicated, very heavy, programming intensive process to get it set up. A lot of input from very skilled programmers, whereas Kuka very much simplified it, where it tracks the product using the camera through the PIC vision software, detects it, and our programmers pretty much just say, pick that up and put it in that box. So it makes their lives a lot easier, which made our implementation much simpler, because obviously instead of weeks on end programming robots, it was much simpler just to use the existing technology that Kuka provided to do that.
Brilliant. Okay. But yeah, so yes, other vendors are available, isn't that what they always say? But yeah, a few webinars on that YouTube channel that people might want to see. It's even just the use cases that people have been able to get the automation or the cobots or robots to help. Okay, has anyone any other questions for Kevin? I was just thinking as well, you mentioned all the plus points, about the staff shortage just being one, repetitive or work that needs to be really accurate in traceability, and that of course that big container ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal last year, all those things. But there was another case study we heard about a few months ago, and it was a company who made those robots that cut your grass, the wee small ones. You just set them out in the lawn. It's not quite that simple, and they do that. And the company who made them, it was basically all hand assembled, and they brought some big vendor or reseller on site to see the process, because they were going to stock these robots. I'm maybe slightly embellishing the story, but they were like, oh right, is this how you make them? When you're selling a product that's really high end, or has to be perfect, you want the production to reflect that sort of level of technology, and showing that it's all automated and really modern. and advanced technologically, that sort of automation really, the use of the automation and the production line really helps put that message across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a lot to the technology. It's constantly advancing, and I think it's something that we try and stay on top of. Obviously, in our industry, we're always looking at the new technologies, and I always look at, I mean, even the autonomous robots we used, even if you go back maybe 4 or 5 years, the solution to that would have been conveyors. And then when you put conveyors in, you're bolting metal to the floor, you're blocking your warehouse, it's taking up footprint. You then have issues with, okay, how do operators get in and out? They're going to have to jump over conveyors, you have to put in step overs, etc. So the new technology with autonomous robots now is transforming, and we're seeing that not just in manufacturing, but warehousing and logistics. Years ago, it used to be miles and miles of conveyors around a warehouse with totes going around the world to get one item picked. It was well and good years ago where you were replenishing stores and there might be 50, 60 items in a tote. Whereas nowadays I've been in warehouses where you have one tote, that's a big tote, 600 mil long, going miles around a warehouse, and it's because Kevin in Ireland has ordered one pair of socks. It's crazy. It's not flexible. It's not adjusting with the times. And now, even after COVID, now obviously e-com's gone through the roof, and that's a big transition within the warehouse and distribution now, where they're not replenishing stores anymore. They're shipping 1 or 2 items direct to a customer's house. That's how they adapt to that, and that's where again the autonomous robots has come in. Technology is there to do that now, and also from, as you say, about the advanced technology and looking that optimizing the process. SureScreen, for example, have constantly had in so many customers. They've had several members of government. Say Boris Johnson was there, Matt Hancock was on a day. We've got a few of all the well-known names now are all down showing their faces for the photo ops, but a lot of other customers that they can approach, as I say, for different products, not just COVID. They have other lateral flow test kits now they're producing that they can then show their customers and say, look at the technology we have, look at the innovation, look at what we're doing. That then puts them above their competitors in the market as well, and opens more opportunities for them to continue to grow.
Absolutely. And it was as well, they didn't have to stop everything. It was the sort of staggered approach. The first they put in a wee bit, and then in the background working on the bigger picture. And I know obviously that was like, it had to be done really, really quickly. That's probably not typical, but it is, testing the water, working out the process, and then, investing and going bigger. But I know
absolutely. Yeah, we do see that in the industry as well. Quite often customers have maybe done it manually for so many years, and they're saying, right, how do we get to the next level? A lot of the customers I go into, and they're just they have a big empty warehouse with loads of people, and they just say, how can we make this better? How can we do it faster, quicker, technology? They know they need automation, but quite often, what is that automation? Yeah. And often it might be a small step, put in some conveyors, put in a labeling system, streamline that process, and just take the low hanging fruit, if you like, first. It's not often you go from complete manual, everybody with bits of paper, to full blown automation overnight. Although we have done in some warehouses, which is always a challenge in itself. But no, it is quite common, as I say, and with the technology, it is quite modular. You can always add on to it and develop it and identify another area. Okay, how can we do that now? How can we increase the efficiency of this process? How can we reduce labor counts, etc.? And as I was saying there, before I cut off, if a lot of the labor, it's a shortage of labor, but also it's, nobody wants to stand in a warehouse for a 12-hour shift just carrying a box from A to B. You're now actually giving them a bit more of a productive task that's adding value to your process, but also making them feel valued as well. We've got guys on that site there that, to be honest, they're bored stiff doing their job. Whereas now they're working with robots, they're working with technology, they know how to run an automated line. It's for their own knowledge as well, and it advances them and upskills them for their own career paths as well, which makes it easier then to retain staff as well, because they find it interesting again, instead of just carting boxes from A to B.
Or torquing a screw or whatever. No, absolutely. Okay, has anyone any questions for Kevin? Kevin, do you want to put your email or hang on, I might be able to grab it here, the website anyway. You're based in Belfast and Boucher Road, isn't that right?
We are, yeah.
There we go. There's the website anyway, and I'll share. If you want to share your slides, you can send them to me, and I can send them on to everybody later on. But
Yep, no problem. I'll send it through to you.
Super. Can you make me? No, I'm talking away. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand or just shout out. You should be able to unmute yourself. In the meantime, Kevin, can you make me host again? If you go over to my little box and hover above it, you can hit the 3 buttons that says make host.
Yeah. Should be you now.
Super, thank you very much. Okay. So Catherine's saying thank you, Kevin. That was very interesting and informative. Okay, no other questions. Right. Well, I'll let us off for a cup of tea, and I'm just going to see what I said, what time to come back. I think it was. Sorry, so many windows open and closed it. I think right if we come back at sorry, 11. What time are we at? 10:45. Does that suit everyone? Okay. And then we have Josh. I can see Josh there. Josh on at 10:45. I'm nearly sure that's right. Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Josh. I've lost my agenda, but yeah, brilliant. Okay, everybody. Zoom recording and then make post. So thank you very much, Josh, for doing this. I know it was very last minute, so I really appreciate it.
No, you're all right. Happy enough to do it. So I'll share now.
Yeah.
Okay, happy enough. All right. So as Gillian says, my name is Josh McCann. I'm a technology executive with the Innovation Research and Development team in Invest in I. Today, I'll kind of just go over some of our, just trying to get this bar out of the way. Some of our options for supporting businesses that are maybe considering automation or robotic projects. General idea of Invest in I, if you don't know, I'm sure everyone does, but we're the Economic Development Agency in Northern Ireland. And currently our general thesis of how to improve the economy is by supporting businesses that have potential to export. So if your business is considering an automation or robotics project, kind of what's the importance or why would you consider it? From our perspective, generally companies that are innovating are twice as likely to be growing. It's also demonstrating a greater potential for job growth, better qualified people being invested in their training and skills, and then that leads to more exports, which drives further growth. So investments in innovation are responsible for 2/3 of the UK productivity growth. And generally from our perspective, we see that development happening over time and then increasing to collaboration with other businesses and companies, which makes the companies more productive than those that don't collaborate. And then finally, the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, their aim is to grow the UK research and development investment to 2.4%, and then that will hopefully drive UK productivity growth by 30%. And this is a particular interest for us in Northern Ireland because we lag 15% behind the UK. So seeing automation and robotics and cobots as a potential avenue to increase our productivity, and obviously for our businesses, allow them to be more successful. So what factors would a business be concerned about with relating to productivity? The actual calculation takes into factor all these variables. And generally the projects we see come across for support, they look at how they can make more with the materials and people they have, which obviously increases their turnover and improves their productivity. Or the opposite, they look at how automation can reduce the wastage of materials or reduce the energy bill, and then drive that productivity value as well. So there's different factors to consider how you'll make the internal business case for that investment. So from our perspective in R&D, we want to see companies kind of what we talked about before earlier today, those smaller projects that kind of build that internal confidence, the capabilities and skills, the small, easy wins, and then that builds the confidence to take on more R&D over time. So we want to see them go up this innovation escalator, we call it internally. So that the smaller scale projects, we open up to a wider range of businesses. Those are mainly done through advice and some vouchers, innovation vouchers, or even just guidance or signposting. And then we want to see kind of more investment from the company into larger R&D projects over time. And then we want to see them eventually reach out to other businesses, organizations, and collaborate to drive new knowledge. So what support do we actually offer in Invest in I? Free advice and guidance. Hopefully everyone knows of and has used NI Business Info, which which we run. It's a great resource. It's very easy to navigate. It's updated frequently. It was very useful during COVID to navigate all the COVID response schemes, but it's something that we'd encourage a lot of businesses to make use of. The energy resource efficiency consultancy, this is kind of geared towards businesses that have large resource and energy spends, and that's to try and advise them on the best way to make use of driving down those costs. Innovate Edge, which is a revamped enterprise European network, and that's kind of across the Innovate UK strand across the UK and Ireland. So where the Northern Ireland Edge is based within Invest&I. Innovation vouchers, which will be very useful and very interesting to a lot of businesses, especially you can use them with catapult centres across the UK. So if you have an automation or robotic project, it could be interesting to look at the specific application with it. So your main interest there might be the high value manufacturing catapult or the satellites catapult. But now with innovation vouchers allowing businesses or organizations or individuals to work with a knowledge provider across Northern Ireland, but also in the UK. So it gives people access to, like, for example, the regional colleges in Northern Ireland and the expertise there to understand how a robot or a cobot could be integrated into their business or into a scoping exercise of maybe a new application of automation. So that would be a very useful support tool. Technical development incentive grants, which are used to access external skills that are not part of your core business to try and drive export potential. Project definition, grant for R&D, which I'll talk a wee bit more about, which would be kind of the core of what our team does in Invest&I. And then knowledge transfer partnerships, which Northern Ireland is kind of one of the best at utilising. Those are effectively a partnership between a university, academic, a business or organisation with a project challenge or goal, and a graduate, where the graduate will work in the business on the technical challenge, but with the assistance and help and knowledge base of the academic. And generally, we see those being quite successful here and driving a lot of growth in a lot of small regional businesses. So project definition, they're a grant to explore feasibility and new commercial projects that take a new product or process or service and how it impacts your business. Or they can be used to develop proposals for external funding applications to the likes of, say, Innovate UK or Made Smarter project bids. Generally, they're good use to scope out those grant for R&D projects. So are those investments in robots or automation. So we talked earlier about you could have a factory where it would have traditionally been conveyors being deployed to try and make a process more effective or higher productivity. But would you have been better off actually investing in autonomous robots to do that job for you? So a project definition could be used to try and evaluate both avenues and decide which would be the best for investing in the future. And what costs that actually supports it. We can support internal salaries, consultancy, which is capped, intellectual property, so like a search for patents to see if you're going to have any issues, collaborative agreements with different partners, and then prior to submission application, you must engage with a contact within Invest&I. So number one thing about Invest&I support, it's not retrospective. You have to talk to us before you spend any money on the project. And then the letter of offer is issued, and then you can start the spending. So we'll not touch any projects that have already started. And then project definition, it's quite supportive up to 50%, or capped at 50K on project costs. It's a wee bit higher just because it is a scoping exercise. So the grant for R&D, so this would be the main support we have for a lot of our client companies. So Invest&I works on the client model, where we have offering of innovation vouchers to the wider business base to everyone kind of in Northern Ireland can apply. But then we've only a limited budget, so we want to try and help businesses that have a higher potential to export. And for us, that's our idea behind trying to drive economic growth in Northern Ireland. So we have some criteria for higher levels of support or more niche support options. So for grant for R&D, then you need to have certain criteria to meet in terms of sales targets, external sales outside of Northern Ireland, and then growth potential. So what could a grant for R&D actually support? The project costs can be below and greater than £50,000. We cover internal staff time, consultancy, materials, testing, and travel and accommodation. Typical projects can range all different sectors, but we've seen projects that look at agri engineering, automation, or ICT projects that look at IoT for machinery and trying to identify how well used the equipment is. But effectively, we'd want to see some type of innovation. So internally for investing, these are probably terms you'll not come across in your business, but for us, these are common terms. Additionality, we don't want to be the first person you ask money from. We want to see some type of potential. You went to the bank or an alternative financer like White Rock for the project, and then we are the funder kind of last resort. And we'll build the argument if there's potential for the project to be external to NI, displacement of sales of labour, viability is your business a going concern and likely to continue. Risk with R&D projects in general, there's obviously going to be a higher inherent risk, and we're not going to avoid that. We're just going to ask to see mitigations and how you plan to get around those risks or de-risk it as much as possible. And then value for money, because we're using public funds, then wider economic benefits, which we calculate internally. So what makes a good project? So we'd like to see a level of innovation to be high, and as I said, the technical risk to be present, but also that presents then the challenge of the R&D project. But how are you going to mitigate that? What process do you have in place? Potential to create intellectual property, and then exploitation potential. How are you going to commercialize the project? And then we'd obviously like to see that benefit the company, but also we look at the wider impact of that to other businesses that might be in your supply chain. And then alignment to strategy and government at the minute, so the 10X strategy. And then from a company perspective, what we like to see is the ability of the management team, their expertise of the staff, how much they actually need the money. We want to see it's a true requirement for us to be involved. Viability, the ongoing ability for the business to continue on, and then track record if they've actually done R&D before. As we said in that escalator, we handle businesses that have had no R&D expertise or experience before, and up to those who are continuing to do it, and then expanding on that over time into the reach and risk of their projects. So we can help. The project definition can be used to apply for Innovate UK competitions. This is probably the main benefit of project definition, is the application to bigger national funding competitions. We're quite conservative in our funding rates, that we'll always be trying to get the best value for money. Innovate UK, because it's such a bigger competition, they'll actually have a base rate, which will actually, we'd see as quite generous. So we'd obviously heavily encourage businesses to apply for those competitions whenever they make sense to do so, and their goals align. For example, at the minute, there's the Made Smarter robotic innovation competition. It's more for mature robotics being implemented in a new factory setting, so manufacturing businesses would be interested in that. We can also connect you with partners in the knowledge transfer network. Whenever you get into the stage where you're looking for collaborative partners for projects that are probably just beyond the scope or the ability of your business, but you know others who can, the knowledge transfer network is quite good in connecting you. Or if you have a grand challenge, or a larger business has a grand challenge you think you can tackle and solve with your product and service, then they might be good to get in touch with. And then obviously we can also provide advice and feedback on applications prior to your submission. Even if we don't get involved with the project definition, we're still happy to try and connect and give advice and feedback on that. We see a lot of projects go through to Innovate UK competitions, and we kind of know what they're looking for in terms of how much information and how strong an application is. Because the last thing we want to do is businesses waste time on applications that they know are going to go nowhere. So our main contact is Richard Peelan. He's known as the Innovation Advisor. He's good to talk to in general about any projects, because if we can't help, we'll always try our best to signpost you to someone who can, whether that's the local councils or that's Innovate UK or Innovate Edge for Northern Ireland. But happy to take questions or any project specifics you want to talk. I think that's from me, Gillian.
Thank you, Josh. That was brilliant. Has anyone any questions? And I know from doing R&D, the R&D application myself, the Invest NI, our client executive at the time, was really, really helpful. You know, you were going through the list of criteria and all the different things. You know, they really helped us make sure that we had answered the questions. You know, it was all there, but sometimes it's difficult when you're doing these, especially for the first time. It's there, but you don't realize it, and just helping us get it filled out properly so that it was successful. So definitely make sure that you get as much help as possible. But the other thing I was going to say, you mentioned the KTN program. One of our recordings on our YouTube channel, I sound like one of those people my children on TikTok. So, yeah, P. McCann, obviously they are not a small business, but they have used the KTNs really successfully for small projects, you know, to test out AI and immersive technologies and different things. So there's a really great presentation on one of our, I think it might be on our one of our AI webinars. And the other thing I was going to say was, yes, I think I put in the chat there about the Made Smarter, the Innovate UK thing, but we also, on another one of our webinars, we had Innovate UK talking about some of the supports that they offer as well. So you might have to play them all at double speed to get through it, but it's all there. It's all there.
So generally, we'll always try and work with Innovate UK. We're not kind of competing against anybody. We're here to try and help businesses as much as possible. So we're happy to have conversations to try and get businesses the support they need.
Yeah, and obviously Invest NI knows all the programs that are there, you know, with themselves and other bodies. So it's always really good to engage for that guidance. Any other questions for Josh?
I'll pop my email in the chat and Richard. So if anyone does have anything later on they want to follow up with, happy to talk.
Brilliant, thank you. And to be an Invest NI client, you know, if you want to apply for the funding and different things, it's really, you have to be registered in Northern Ireland. There's no, you know, you don't have to be a certain size or anything, or
not a certain size. There's different criteria, kind of depending on the business, but effectively we want to see growth potential or else a certain level of revenue and export either potential or currently exporting a certain amount. So they're kind of the main criteria, but we'll work with most businesses to try and help. Yeah.
So, and I know that there's a good few of the companies who are on the Digital Service Programme we've referred on to Invest NI to so they can have the chat about becoming clients. And we can, if you're not already on the programme and aren't an Invest NI client, you know, we can absolutely go to Invest NI directly yourselves, but we know, you know, we can help work out what those sort of criteria are and tease that out. So, okay, any more questions? No, Josh, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank Grania. Maybe you won't thank her because she
yeah, no worries, will do.
Got you in here. But look, thank you very much. We have Tony Hughes from ANSEC IA coming up at the reason. I'm going to have to I can put you in breakout rooms or you can go for another tea break, and I know what the answer will be, what the preference is. Tony's traveling right now, so he can't really join until 11:30. So what you could go and watch our YouTube channel if you want. Could I also ask, if you've signed in, I have to tick off the names against the registration, so it would be really helpful for me if you have signed in as, you know, on iPhone 1 or user or whatever. If you could just, you don't have to put it, you don't have to change your name or anything on the thing. If you could just private message me and just say this is such and such, just helps me. And also, if you can remember, the feedback form is up there, and if you take 2 minutes to do that. So I record. So over to you, Tony. Thank you very much for this.
Just going to start my video as well, so people haven't seen me already yet today. So yeah, look, great to be here. Thanks very much for the invite. Not sure what I missed so far. I'm sure it's been a fascinating morning to date. Lots of insights, lots of things to digest and ponder. So yeah, just glad and happy to be here.
Thank you. So if you want to give us a wee background to yourself and then some of your thoughts on the importance of cybersecurity in a engineering or manufacturing environment, or where you're using operational technology, you know, where you're maybe thinking of automating some processes or putting in some cobotics or robotics.
Okay, okay. I'm sure I've been introduced before. Now, very quickly, yeah, Director of Cybersecurity at ANSEC IA. So my background generally has been cybersecurity and its various guises: information security, data privacy, IT audit, call it what you like, over the last 25, 30 years. I kind of coexist with that environment. In terms of production and development, I've worked with a lot of global companies who have gone as far as fully automating processes where they have got into autonomous production, where there is no human involved. They have the cobotics space where they coexist right down to process automation, where some companies just want to start thinking about how they deal with staff shortages, you know, the inability to hire the correct resources, or just some of those tasks that are mundane and focused and need to be done by robotics. And again, for efficiencies, because everyone likes a return on investment. So where you can see efficiency savings, it sometimes works to put a robot into there. In terms of the challenges in operational technology are very, very similar to the challenges in information technology. It really comes down to a lot of the basic things that we do. It's really about risk managing the environment. So you need to understand when you put together a plan for implementing or enhancing a process automation system, you need to have a cybersecurity strategy that embraces not only your operational technology environment, but also your information technology environment, particularly if you're considering any integration between the two. And you need to have a fairly mature and fairly robust security structure in place before you would consider that step. So when you think of a lot of the process automation that we have used in the past, I'm going way back here to Modbus and some of the operating systems and processes that are designed to deliver on automating those processes. They were designed to get things done. They were designed to open gates, pump pumps, you know, fill wells, fill water, move things along conveyor belts. They weren't really designed with security in mind. Now, luckily, we do have a lot of companies have come along in the last sort of 10 years and have enhanced that environment to the point where now we literally have companies who make bespoke firewall solutions and bespoke software purely for the operational technology environment. So when it comes down to around that, it's really have your strategy, know what your assets are, know what exists in your manufacturing zone, your enterprise zone, know what they are, know what they do, know who would do them harm, how they would do that harm. So what could they do to manipulate that? And if you think about cybersecurity as being really a triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, if we all take a step back to the last 5, 6 years when we had GDPR and personal information, confidentiality was always very much the king of that triad. Confidentiality had to be dealt with for personal information. In a manufacturing environment, high availability is king. So you want your processes available, you want your machinery available, you want to be processing things. And that looks very different in terms of risk profile. If you work in an environment that's, for example, manufacturing a metal plate that's going to be resold later on, or if you're perhaps refining raw materials that are, for example, you might think of dairy products or anything that's, you know, perishable. If you've got a time to market where you're basically selling it on before you finish the product, then that's going to have much higher implication. So when I talk about the availability, you need to consider what the asset is, what the threat is, what the impact it will have on the availability and the integrity of your manufacturing, and then look at the risks and threats. So is it going to impact on health and safety, for example? Is it going to be a risk to the individual who perhaps cohabits the space with your robotics? Or is it going to be downtime in production? Or is it going to be some other third thing? Is there something there that could harm your reputation, either ethically or in the community or the environment? And those are the sorts of things you need to consider. Now, there are processes for doing this. I know, and certainly in America, the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they have very granular standards because a lot of the operational technology they operate is in a governmental space. Think nuclear, think military. So they have very granular standards. If you need some guidance on this, you can look up standards such as, I think it's NIST 800, SP 882. It's currently under revision, but it gives quite a lot of detail as to how to develop your cybersecurity strategy, how to develop your cybersecurity standards, how to do your asset and risk assessment, and also how to deliver controls against those. And most importantly, what can you do if it all goes wrong? How do you develop a backup and contingency system that allows you to return to development and production as quickly as possible, particularly if you're in one of those environments where time to market is critical?
Sorry, I was on mute there. No, that's really interesting. And I know there's a thread of, like, people will all have heard of, ransomware attacks and different things. So it really is that sort of downtime that people, you can have the best systems in as well, but sometimes it's just somebody clicking on an email on the wrong link, and that unleashes a fury. So there's your IT, somebody in finance clicks on, and it happens to, you'd be surprised to the level of people this happens to. It's not an intern or somebody on placement. This happens at all levels. Somebody clicks on an email which seems genuine, can you open this? It seems like it's coming from somebody, here's an invoice, can you click on it? You download it and something happens. So it's making sure as well that there's the link between that IT and the OT as well. There's
in terms of that network segmentation, that's why I'm always very guarded about organizations who come and ask the question, how do I integrate my IT and my OT? Depends on what you're producing and the scale you're producing at. So when we run cybersecurity simulations or we do incident response with companies who operate globally, they still tend, even at a global level, to have their operational technology separate. They run it in a separate, virtual LAN, virtual network, or VPN connection between the main IT environment and the OT environment. Now there's an outlier in there. So normally what we'd expect to see is a paired set of firewalls that separates the operational technology environment and the IT environment, with a very, very bespoke set of rules about what it allows to happen and what it doesn't allow, the traffic it allows through, the traffic it doesn't allow through. But when you work maybe at a larger level and you're working with multiple sites, so you might have multiple factories or multiple production sites, you tend to want to have your sort of data historian and your records and your sort of telemetry, so that you can look at production across 10 sites and benchmark, or you want to be able to look at who was manufacturing what, when it was manufactured, quality assurance standards, all of that evidence. It sits in a kind of its own demilitarized zone on the edge of those two. But it's when we come back to, you're quite right, ransomware is a threat because of your information technology. Your IT environment is looking directly into your OT environment to capture, for example, telemetry and metrics and service levels. Then you do run the risk of contaminating that. I suppose the difference is how you back things up. If you have a backup in an IT environment, you have to go back, obviously, maybe a little bit further, because the thing about ransomware sometimes is it's very obvious in the first pass. You have ransomware, everybody has seen mock-ups and have seen the screens, hopefully not for real, and it shows you've been encrypted, you have to pay me 2 Bitcoin, etc. Those people tend to be persistent on those networks for quite a long time, and what we call double and triple extortion attacks, collecting and collating information, understanding your business and understanding the value of that information. So if you don't pay the ransom, they can then extort you with, well, we'll release your public information. So the backup of that information takes in the aforementioned GDPR and the IT. The important side on the OT is generally what you need to have is a repository of configurations, secure, strong configuration for your robotic devices, for your, you think about a SCADA environment, you've got your PLCs. How do you push code back out to those? How do you push instruction back out? They tend to be, unlike some of the complex IT environments we have, and I'm not suggesting for a second that ICS and SCADA systems are not complex, but they need a set of instructions. It's how you securely store those instructions and how you push those instructions back out to your ICS environment. Indeed, there are studies at the moment that suggest that as you scale up in a SCADA and ICS environment, OT environment, you should even consider segmentation within the OT environment. So, for example, if you have a critical manufacturing plant, if one part of the plant gets hit with something that has an impact on a PLC, a controller, then basically it steps down, the rest of the production doesn't help. It's almost like a hot recovery. You can just basically hot swap it out, repair it, fix it, reconfigure it, and take it out again. I think the danger of that is that we have so much happening in a sort of manufacturing zone or production zone in an ICS SCADA environment. The first thing is we don't always understand what all the assets are, and that's one of the problems you find when you go in when there is an incident, what is happening here, what is operating, where's your points of failure, where is your architecture, and how do you understand within that architecture what each component part is. And we tend to build it up. I use the analogy of PCs. People bought a PC many years ago. They bought a PC, they put a keyboard, a mouse, a modem, a printer, a game port, a speaker system. And suddenly, if anyone remembers, underneath your desk, you had a ball of wires, and all those wires did something very, very important. And you put those wires there, so you know they all had a purpose. But would you want to pull one of those wires because you don't really understand what connects to what? It's really important about keeping good asset lists, keeping good housekeeping around that, and what those actual assets do, what they perform, what their criticality is. So if you think about it, a lot of the standards will talk about, zone security. So you've got 5 zones in security. Zone 0 is this particular asset won't really do an awful lot of harm. If it's compromised, it's a quick hot swap out, it's not a problem. Zone 1, how do I protect this asset from a casual or non-malicious person who just make a mistake? Zone 2, we get into malicious actors. What do we do if someone deliberately targets this particular asset? Right up to Zone 4, and Zone 4 is a credentialed, a resourced, concentrated, and a focused attack on your infrastructure. How would you defend that? And that comes right back to your risk management. Know what those assets are. Know what the threat to the assets is likely to be, what that attack vector looks like. Will it come through your IT environment? Will it come physically into your OT environment? Will it come to an internet connected environment? Although we always tell people nothing directly in your OT environment should be internet facing. That's a given. And then basically, what do we do to treat that risk? And if that risk was to fail, and we fail to manage that risk and materialized, what are our recovery options? In NIST, as we have now in ISO 27001, which is the Information Security Management Standard, it's all aligned to the 5 pillars: identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery. And all those controls sit around that. So identify, know what you have, know how to protect it, know how to detect any incidents or threats to that. What's your initial response going to be in order to keep production running? And then what's your recovery plan look like? If you can't recover your primary site in the OT side or the IT side as that it goes, what's your contingency planning on that? Particularly if manufacturing, obviously high availability is critical. The more downtime means the more potential loss of earnings. And that can be critical to some organizations. They can't afford that level of downtime. And you have to look at what is your tolerable downtime? What would that look like for any particular asset or for the entire OT environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as well, especially smaller suppliers, you're often in a supply chain to somebody bigger, and they're kind of looking as well. People are much more aware of the impact cybersecurity has. And sometimes if you're maybe going for, bidding for something or trying to show that you're a secure part of that supply chain, they'll ask for certain credentials or, how can you prove that you've considered these sort of things, or are there certifications? Or I know you've mentioned NIST.
Yeah, well, ISO IEC have their own standard on industrial control systems, 62243, quite complex, quite complex to implement. I think really when it comes to standards, there are standards on everything. If you really want to drill down, there is a standard on every aspect of security, right through from high level. Taking it right back to basics, you always have to think about it. If you think too much about cybersecurity, people get paralyzed because it just gets so scary and so much, it gets overwhelming. So you really have to start with the basics. Is if you're operating in a manufacturing environment and you've come from a manufacturing environment and now you're into robotics, if you think about everybody who started in business started to do something to manufacture something. Everyone's become, as they grow bigger, they become a HR expert. Once you are able to do something, you're an expert in doing it. Once you can't do it for yourself and you hire people, you have to become a HR expert. Once you have to hire those staff, you have to become a finance expert. Once you automate it, you have to become an IT expert. And then you start bringing people into your organization who you have to trust to have the same interest of the business's heart as yourself. So you have to think, right, okay, how do I bring all this together? And it's really about, do I have a strategy for the use of digital technology, whether it's on the IT side or whether it's on the OT side? So what is my purpose and use case for this? So you think about defining all of the terminology. What is it I want to do here? What is I'm trying to achieve? What does the use of technology achieve for me in terms of efficiencies or maybe better health and safety environment? Because some companies use robotics to replace humans where they'd be in a dangerous environment. How am I going to create that return on investment? Then think about your risks. Okay, now I understand why I'm putting this here, how it agrees with my overall business aims and objectives. I can now start to look at, well, what's the risks to me achieving those business objectives? And what does technology contribute to managing that risk? And what additional risk does that technology create in that? And then you're back to 101, create your risk register against those items and say, right, I have a business objective, and once I have to achieve something, there's a risk I won't achieve it. What does IT help with that? Or how does it contribute to that risk? What does that asset do? Who will do it harm? How will they do it harm? What controls do I need to put in place? And if it gets to the point where you think that this is going to be quite a complex operation, then you start to look to the standards. You might start off with something, for example, like ISO 27001, which gives you an information security management framework and says, look, here's the framework around which we've got a baseline of. Just the most recent 22 standard has dropped down. There's 92. They call them controls, but they're really control objectives. They're things that you aspire to do at the start and want to demonstrate that you can achieve that control. Once you have a standard like that, if someone comes and says to you, okay, how do you prove to me you operate in a secure environment? At least you can show them a certificate and say, look, I'm ISO certified, therefore I have an information security management standard. Once you get to that point, then the next logical point is, because there's a crossover now in all of the ISO standards, is do you want to get certified to a standard that deals mainly with your OT environment? Do you look at the 62243 and say it's worth my while doing that? It really depends on what your supply chain demands. If they demand specific access, we often see it in the IT environment where people say, we won't deal with you in the supply chain unless you have ISO 27001 certification, because it does away with the questions, it does away with the spreadsheets. The IT team spend inexorable hours answering 300 questionnaires about every granular piece of your security. I suppose the question is, speak to your supply chain, speak to the people who are doing business with you, find out what they want, what they need. If it's a standard, fine. Standards have an overhead, they're a costly business. Getting the initial work done to implement a standard is expensive. The certification and supervisory audits, as well as that, can cost a couple of £1,000s a year per unit, per area under the scope of attestation. So it can get quite expensive. You have to really bring it back and decide, what are the risks? What are the costs associated with managing this risk? And does that suggest that we are in a position where we should move to a standards-based approach? Or are we okay for now with a risk-based approach, as long as it's done correctly, as long as we understand those threats? So do we look at, for example, common vulnerability systems? So we look at open source CVSS. What are the vulnerabilities to X piece of software in an open source and in an OT environment? Are we using open source software? Does that in itself provide its own threat landscape because we don't have control over it? Do we look at what vendors we use to control this? And there are, without promoting any one or other vendors, there are vendors now who will provide ruggedized devices that sit in the OT environment and secure that, and will separate the OT environment in segregation inside the OT environment, and will also separate it from the IT environment, will encrypt the traffic in transit between the two, and allow you to collect telemetry in a safe and secure way. And that's the way the OT environment vendor landscape is going. There are more and more people actually providing those bespoke OT software solutions to manage security within an OT environment.
Great, thank you. I mean, there's so much to think about, but yes, as you say, you just need to bring it back down to, that sort of business plan. What do I need, and what are the risks? Has anyone any questions for Tony? You can shout out or put it in the chat. But Tony, I'll share your contact details afterwards, or you can stick them in the chat there.
Oh, you can share them with the group. I think the most important thing is, think about the impacts of each asset and your OT environment in its entirety. If you've got a production environment, what happens if the production environment stops? Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. I've seen it in transportation. So in transportation, someone says, look, we'll have an issue here. You're going to be a day late with your delivery. If it's not a critical delivery, it's fine. I've also worked with food companies with perishable, dairy type products. You ring someone up and say, it's going to be a day late. That doesn't work. Plus, it's not just the onward impact of you sending out refinishing those products and delivery. You basically probably have a tailback at your gates of if it's dairy products. You have farmers, you've tankers queued up at your gates waiting to actually process those goods while they're perishing in the tanks. So the overall cost. I'll give you an example. We had a company who had operations in Ireland and the US. They wanted to invest in a solution that effectively would have cost in around the region of 300,000 euros. It was expensive, reassuringly expensive solution, as someone I know would call it, but it was required. The A team had identified that it covered off a lot of the risks that they had identified. There was a discussion over it was too much money. This is a company that operates globally. We were able to go in and use simulations in a cyber attack that took them offline for 17 hours. In that 17 hours, it cost the same organization $47 million to be offline for less than a day. Suddenly, once the finance kicks in, once the realization, the monetary value kicks in, and that's the thing about loss production in an automated environment, particularly depending on how you've acquired devices. If you're on a long lease with those, depends on what your long-term prospects looking at. If you're not utilizing them, if you're not producing, if you monetize those losses, then suddenly you can get a better idea of what the total cost of ownership of that is, including cybersecurity, and what that cybersecurity budget point looks like. Because it's one of those questions you get asked. You walk into an environment, whether it's IT, OT, or a combination, and the question you get asked is, how much should I spend on cybersecurity? And that is something that you can actually work out by monetizing what the loss of that service, or the reputational harm, the financial losses, or indeed the human losses could be if that was to fail. And again, we talk here about co-environments. I have a cousin, I suppose I should tell this story. I have a cousin who works in a completely sealed environment in Europe, in Germany. He works for a pharmaceutical company. He is the only human who sets foot in that environment, and it's a sterile environment. And he suits up, and I said, okay, but you're working in a fulfillment center for a large pharmaceutical company. The only reason the robots know he is there is because of the sensors on his jacket, and they know to avoid him. If he didn't have that, I said, what would happen if you forgot your jacket? He said, I wouldn't be telling you about it, because literally they don't stop for anything or anybody unless it recognizes the telemetry of the object. So they only recognize him with his jacket on. Otherwise, he would, as he said, be smashed into a million pieces. So you have to think, for example, the risks as well of cohabitating that space. What do you do if you need maintenance, you need repair, you need any sort of granular activity around those devices? How do you secure that environment? How do you make sure it's safe for individuals to go into? Because cybersecurity does not stop with passwords and ransomware and everything else. The true meaning of cybersecurity is preservation of human life. You need to make sure that you look after your employees as well. So there's a lot of factors here, but if you start with that risk-based approach, your human factors are not a risk. Just list all the risks out. There's no such thing as too many risks to start with. The idea is to make sure you captured them all, and that you've got a treatment plan for each of those risks, whether it's on the OT side, the IT side, the integration of the two, and then work from there. And that's something everyone can do without knowing how to code, without knowing exactly what a PLC does, or what happens in a HMI or in a SCADA system. You understand, I need this to do something for me, therefore here's the risk I won't get it done. Start there, work your way from there, learn a little bit more about the subject as you go, and your risk management methodology will sort of get more refined and more sharpened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mentioned as well earlier about NI Cyber. So we've so many great local companies, and Tony's part of the team at ANSEC IA as well. But we've the breakfast on the 23rd of February in ESET. So I think I have the link up there somewhere. Everyone's very welcome along to that. It's just a networking event, or I hate that word, but it's a great way, to meet people like Tony. Tony, I don't know if you're going to be there. I can't remember if you've registered.
Hoping to be.
Yes, so I mean that would be a great chance to meet Tony as well if you want to chat more. So has anyone any more questions for Tony? You can put them in the chat there. I'm scrolling back up here.
If anyone has a question and they don't want to put it in chat or don't want to publicly discuss it, it's fine. Gillian will share my contact details at the end. And effectively, if someone wants to reach out, like just wants a question answered, wants a 5, 10, 15-minute chat, 20-minute chat, like it's fine. It's like I always refer to lawyers. When you ask a lawyer how much they charge, they always tell you the first question is free. What's your second question? It's not like that. If you want to come and have a quick conversation with me, or ask me a question, or doorstep me on the 23rd, look, feel free. I'll answer your question. It's not a problem.
No, absolutely.
As best as I can.
Tony is super, and I mean, even the fact that he's here today, one of our other speakers had to cancel, so and Tony has very kindly stepped in. He's great. There's his email there. Okay, so the feedback form's there, and Tony's email is there. Tony, thank you so much. That was brilliant. And I think as well, like cybersecurity, I don't want this. I hate FUD, but it's not. If it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. So it is. I don't want to scare people, but it is something that people need to really consider.
On that, Gillian, when I talk to any client and they say to me, what do I do to prepare for cybersecurity? What do I do? Whatever. I've been in I've been an incident responder, a gold commander. I've been in rooms with organizations of all sizes, scales, and sectors on the morning of an incident. It's not pretty. It's not nice. It's psychologically damaging. What I always say to people is, look, don't think of the worst that can happen. Just think about, okay, if I wake up tomorrow and there's a major impact on my company, where do I start? Understand what you need to do in the first minutes and the first hours. It's the first minute, a couple of hours that will help you through it. We often refer to it as, we talk about the golden hour when it comes to cardiac arrest. If you can get to a hospital in the first hour, then your chances of survival are good. If you have a plan, you know what to do immediately. You need to know who to talk to, what to do with the staff, what to do with the technology. If you understand that, you're in a really, really good, strong place. And remember, cybersecurity is not a massive thing. It's just a lot of small things done very, very well. Break it down into those small things, work out what you need to do that's relevant to your company and your organization, because not everybody is nuclear in the government and not everybody is a sweetie shop on the corner. It's everything in between. Work out what's important to you, work out those risks, work out what you will do to stop those risks from happening, and ultimately work out, if you wake up in the morning and that worst thing had happened, what would you do by way of recovery? And if you keep it down to those levels, everybody's capable of grabbing those concepts and he's working with them.
No, absolutely. Okay, so if anyone had, I put Tony's email there. Thank you very much. I'm gonna, I think, leave it there for today. That was I've put the feedback form there too. If you can please fill that in, that would be fantastic. It takes 2 minutes. I haven't made it very onerous. But look, thank you very much. And next week we have IoT. So you're very welcome to come along to that. AI the next week, and the very last one is immersive on the 8th of March. So thank you all very much for your time this morning and for coming along. Thanks to all our presenters, for Viioni, for Kevin and Josh at InvestNI, and of course Tony. So look, everyone, thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.